After 17 years of war in Afghanistan, the US has recently hinted it's open to peace talks with the Taliban on more than one occasion, widely considered a terrorist organization. However, it doesn't seem that the militants are willing to accept the offer, especially considering the increasing control the group is exerting on the ground. Well, RT was granted rare access to a Taliban militant commander and raised the subject.
The Americans never want to cooperate with the Taliban, and the Taliban has never asked the Americans again to cooperate against the Islamic State. The Americans are bombing us while we fight against ISIS.
Well, the latest suggestion at direct talks between the Taliban and Washington came from the State Department on Friday.
This administration has made clear that it is prepared to engage with and participate in negotiations with both the Taliban and the Afghan government.
The leadership of the Taliban doesn't want to negotiate with the Americans and has never wanted this. And the leadership of Taliban never gave permission to any member to negotiate on their behalf.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis just had a meet and greet with the Afghan president in Kabul. They finally decided to play nice in a bid to get the Taliban down to talks. But just one day before their words of peace, Washington dropped a big F-35B bomb on the Taliban. Looks like the peace process is getting off on the right foot, especially when the U.S. has, for years, led up to this moment, promising both talk and terror.
I want to reinforce to the Taliban that the only path to peace and political legitimacy for them is through a negotiated settlement.
The Taliban cannot win. Their choices are to reconcile, live in irrelevance, or die.
We have the Taliban willing to come to the negotiating table.
There's no talking to the Taliban. We don't want to talk to the Taliban. We're going to finish what we have to finish.
So it's no surprise the Taliban is reluctant to trust promises of peace. And why would they seek it anyway? In the past several months, the Taliban has made substantial territorial gains. Their spring offensive took coalition forces completely off guard, seizing regions all over Afghanistan. Over 100 soldiers and police officers were killed in just 1 week of the offensive, and that's not even counting last week's UN report covering civilian casualties in battles between the coalition and Taliban forces.
With all these resources, you cannot differentiate between gunmen, fighters and civilians? This is not the first time they have targeted civilians several times.
America's 2001 invasion of Afghanistan hoped to oust the Taliban from power, but what materialized was a 17-year-long war, the longest conflict in U.S. history. And now, fast approaching, are monumental peace talks to be held in Moscow between the Taliban and the Afghan government.
We can confirm that we will attend the Moscow conference. We are waiting for the date and agenda. Then we will decide what can be achieved from the conference.
If successful, these talks could mark a step forward in a conflict that currently has no end in sight. Donald Corder, RT.